This video is sponsored by Boo, a social app where you can make friends and date by personality. If you want to interact smoothly and charmingly with people, you can get some in-depth, wingman-esque flirting tips and insightful personality analysis using the telepathy feature. And if you want Reddit, except purely focused on personality types, you can enjoy the social feed. On Boo, you needn't be limited by borders or languages. The alternate dimensions feature allows you to communicate and meet different personality types in different countries and different languages. Sign up using the link below in the description of the video. The 16 types as leaders, INTPs. This is going to be a series where I talk about great leaders of each type. The leaders mentioned in this series will include politicians, people in the army, business people, thought leaders, and spiritual leaders. Basically anyone who warrants the title of leader. As you can imagine, when you scour through history to see the prominent figures, because of the times, lots of these people are going to be men. There'll be more variety in that regard in future videos of this kind, with different titles, such as artists. Also, in some of these episodes of this series, there may be leaders who you might describe as, well, evil, or divisive at the very least. So be warned. Abraham Lincoln. After pondering Lincoln for a long time, including slowly making my way through a 40-hour-long audiobook about him, my opinion of his type fluctuated a lot. INTP is the typical typing of him, but at times, it didn't ring true to me. Eventually I concluded that he was indeed a likely INTP, but one who had found excellent and ingenious ways to mitigate his own weaknesses, and in turn, the weaknesses of the INTP type. Very broadly speaking, those two issues are dealing with people and taking action in chaotic, intense, stressful, and pressuring environments, where you're forced to react and adapt. Despite being an FE inferior type, Lincoln was described as having an astonishing understanding of the public consciousness. His finger was firmly on the pulse of public opinion. This was by design on his part. He realized early on that trying to fight against the will of the public would make your task infinitely more difficult. It would drain you of energy and make you a fish swimming hopelessly against the tide. So he would study, analyze, dissect everything he saw in the papers, anything he heard through the grapevine, any conversation he had with a member of the public, and start to infer, or simply just observe, what the mood of the country, or particular parts of the country, was. Imagine this scene. Lincoln is at sea, sitting on a dinghy. Actually, let's say it's an inflatable swan, and he's sipping away on a pina colada. I'm so glad he was born in the century he was. Anyway, all the while, astonishingly able and powerful swimmers are thrusting themselves slowly and agonizingly forward to the shore, getting to their goal. But Lincoln is staring the opposite direction, out to sea, analysing the ebb and flow, waiting for signs of an incoming wave. Using this wave, and timing it correctly, does one of two things. Either it gets him to the shore before everyone else, or he gets there slightly after, but crucially, has expended no effort in doing so. More than this, the entire time while everyone else was focusing on pushing towards that goal, he had time to think of other things, to plan further, so he saved energy without sacrificing much, if any, speed. Quite cleverly, he manages to solve the INTP SE problem through solving the FE problem. Because in his role as a politician, he realized that action can be, and should be, often dictated by public sentiment, he combined those two things expertly. What's particularly brilliant about this approach is that he was still able to change people's opinions and make huge progress. I haven't looked deeply into this, so I'll just mention it in passing. Lincoln was an autodidact. That's pretty indisputable. He was also very knowledgeable about Euclidean geometry. He studied this intensely. There are some people who speculate that he actually used Euclidean geometry in his speechwriting. The actual structure of the speeches themselves would line up with Euclidean principles, almost like his speeches were mathematical proofs, so to speak. Regardless of how true this is or not, Lincoln was a fantastic communicator, storyteller, speechwriter, orator. Communication is not something that we associate as a natural strength of INTPs. However, as I've mentioned before, they're often great writers. Lincoln leaned into this. He studied the English language in a highly analytical way. He would constantly play around with different ways of expressing the same point, and his communication was extremely linear and logical. To me, this is like a TI, NE, SI trifecta, drawing upon his extensive knowledge, such as studying the plays of Shakespeare, playing around endlessly in a creative way, trying to find the best story or metaphor or analogy to get an idea across, crucially in the most logical, linear, and precise way, but most importantly friendly, with the aim of making it easy to understand for any person, regardless of their education level. He wasn't pretentious, verbose, or off-puttingly intellectual. In fact, the simplicity is what shows the underlying sophistication. Larry Page. Larry Page, along with his co-founder, Sergey Brin, exemplifies many of the innovative tendencies of INTPs. His way of constructing and running Google has become the cultural norm at this point, and has led to many other startups, ones that succeed, and others doomed to failure, trying to emulate that same magic. However, for Larry Page, it wasn't about trying to throw conventions out the window for no reason. Instead, it was about starting from the ground up, with logic, or what Elon Musk often describes as first principles thinking. Like most INTPs, Page always had an eclectic range of interests. As an undergraduate, he worked on solar cars, music synthesizers, and once proposed that his school build a tram through campus. It's very much an anything, to be broad and interdisciplinary in their hobbies, interests, and aspirations. I think this is also reflected in the huge amount of businesses that are included within Alphabet, the now parent company of Google, and many others. Page doesn't feel the need to focus narrowly on one area of interest. That would feel limiting and restricting, and certainly not conducive to the kind of creativity that fuels him. INTPs are often quiet and unassuming outwardly, but their ideas, and the decisions those ideas lead to, can be completely radical. Page's management style was very INTP-esque, both in good ways and bad. Here are some of his management tenets that he would send to his team. Don't delegate. Do everything you can yourself to make things go faster. Don't get in the way if you're not adding value. Let the people doing the work talk to each other while you go do something else. Don't be a bureaucrat. Ideas are more important than age. Just because someone is junior doesn't mean they don't deserve respect and cooperation. The worst thing you can do is stop someone from doing something by saying no, period. If you say no, you have to help them find a better way to get it done. Those always struck me as very INTP-friendly working principles. No need to play politics, jump through hoops, or cut through red tape. The best ideas win. It's meritocratic and doesn't care about rank or title or alleged experience and expertise. If it's your first day on the job and you have the best idea, that's the one they'll choose. It wasn't plain sailing though. During the early days of Google, Page's management style was too, INTP-esque. He was challenging, sometimes brutally so, picking apart and shredding people's ideas, stress testing any suggestions that were brought to him, with irritatingly simple but piercing questions that almost amounted to just asking why over and over. Why isn't it faster? Why isn't this scalable? Why is it designed badly? Why would customers want this? Whose problem does it solve? In fact, Google was run so chaotically during the early days that they needed to bring in a CEO for so-called adult supervision. That CEO, Eric Schmidt, you'll be shocked to hear, was a TE Dom, an ESTJ most likely. After 10 years of him being in charge, Page eventually took back the CEO role. By this point, Page thought about things differently. He eventually concluded that ambitious goals required a harmonious team dynamic. Page declared a new zero tolerance for fighting policy that very much contrasted his approach during the early days of Google. Even the co-founders themselves would have exceptionally harsh and brutal disagreements and arguments. Although you can definitely make the case that conflict can do more for progress than consensus, for INTPs, that's easy. What represents growth is learning to embrace and respect that FE approach more. Google was a company and culture built on respect and reverence for logic and ideas. Those were the non-negotiables, and everything else had to bend around them. Convention, traditional practices, the advice of industry experts who outranked Page in terms of experience. All of those were discarded if they didn't, in Page's view, make sense. As the company started to suffer from the chaotic management style, Page realized that his intensely logical and engineering mindset wasn't enough in itself to keep things moving forward. A respect for harmony was needed. It couldn't all be about cold and calculating logic, no matter how inspiring the creativity that accompanied it was. All great INTP leaders will have to solve the weaknesses associated with their type. Lincoln brilliantly realized that he could use his strengths, his analytical nature, to dissect the public consciousness, and to base his actions and decisions, and crucially the timing of those things, to align with public sentiment. That way, even small amounts of action at the right time would be magnified to an absolutely massive degree. He actually managed to solve both problems in one, in a very elegant way. Larry Page married TI and FE in a beautiful way. Instead of making the culture purely about harmony and getting along with people, although he did eventually realize those were important and essential, the culture itself was based around logic and ideas. So to fit in and be acceptable, so to speak, you had to respect ideas, both your own and other people's. So in a funny way, based on that culture, not speaking your mind, not disagreeing, and not pointing out the flaws in something was a bigger FE violation than biting your tongue. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you are one of the handful of INTPs who watch this channel or that haven't joined the Discord server, then feel free to join us on there. The link is in the description below.